Hello Warfighters, War is Hell. We've got the next episode of the Battlefield 1 campaign where we're talking about Gallipoli. Last episode we talked about the preparation for Gallipoli a little bit and also some of the things that took place with the Naval Task Force. So the Naval Task Force has been defeated and the plan now is to start an invasion of the Dardanelles. So we're going to talk about the landing and everything that took place on the ground in a short amount of time. So 78,000 men of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force for the British, combined with the French Orient Expeditionary Corps, to be the ones who were going to invade the Gallipoli Peninsula. This was all taking place right after the Naval Task Force had failed in 1915. And as we talked about in the last episode, there was a lot of the Allies who really underestimated what the Ottoman Empire was capable of. For example, they thought the landing was going to be completely unopposed. They thought that when they did come against any of the Ottoman forces, they would just surrender right away. And I read one thing too that said don't ever expect a Turkish soldier to surrender with a white flag because it would be very unlikely that they would have any white clothing on them, which was pretty interesting. And they thought that with the lack of skill that the Turkish forces had in their mind, that this would just be a cakewalk. So there wasn't really that much preparation for the campaign, and various contingency plans probably weren't put together as if they were going up against a more respected adversary. However, Ottomans, on the other hand, greatly understood what the Allies were capable of and really started building defensive positions even during the naval campaign that took place earlier in the year. This included them building roads, digging mines all across the beaches, digging trenches and machine gun emplacements. All of this was done while the Allied forces were being assembled. In addition, they gathered together five divisions of conscripts, I should say. Yeah, 5 people. And they were placed on the peninsula with a number of high-ranking officers that were German. So they had a lot of German assistance with this too. Now, they were unsure of where the Allies were going to land, so efforts were put in place to make these units as mobile as possible. Therefore, the beaches were pretty lightly defended, and the main force was farther inland, ready to move to any location the Allies might land. Hold on, there is a cutscene coming up. I will pop back in a second.
What, again? You sure you didn't just want to shoot me?
Come on. Let's get you out of here. This place is about to come down any moment.
No, we can't leave. There are still hostiles coming, and we can't outrun them with our wounded.
You get going then. I'll cover your retreat.
The bishop is still...
I'll make it look like I'm capturing the fort. It'll be enough distraction. Once you get past Allied lines, send up a flare. Let me know you're safe. I'll make my retreat then. Oh, so you're disobeying orders now?
Well, I assume you did to come here.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a proper Aussie now. Gotta look the part.
Right. Up and at him, lads. Let's go.
All right, so the Allies on April 25th, 1915 landed on 6 different beaches. Naval support was to be supplied, but again, we see an example of a lack of preparation. Really caused the individual ship captains to determine the kind of close support that they would give to the landing forces. And I believe that with the recent defeat of the Straits, that was probably one of the reasons why some of them were unwilling to get close to shore and really support the troops. However, as the Allies did get to shore, they were met with well-defended and dug-in Ottomans who really decimated a number of the troops on the shore, in some cases being pinned down for an entire night on the beach. So these well-set-up emplacements really caught a number of Allied units by surprise as well, because one of the things, again, due to a lack of preparation, they didn't have the correct maps, and in some cases their landings were a few miles off of where they had initially intended, so their maps were kind of inadequate at this point, so they didn't even know what they were going up against once they went ahead and hit shore. Many of the allies were not able to really make a coordinated effort forward after they got on the beach. In some cases it was because they were pinned down, or in another case, for example, in the northernmost beach where the allies landed, which is called Y Beach, they had some opportunity to push ashore. They faced little to no resistance against any Ottomans in that area, but their force of 2,000 really wasn't able to do too much over the vast terrain that they would have to cover to kind of take their objectives, and there really wasn't much communication or any at all, or even orders that were created on what they would do once they got to the position that they were at. So they really weren't effective, and there's been a lot of things that I read that said that they really could have capitalized on some of the advances that they made. But within a short amount of time, the Allied attack had lost all of its forward progress, and the defenders were becoming more and more numerous as they kept pouring in. Efforts were made early by the Ottomans to drive the Allies off of the beach, but they too took heavy losses as the Allies had time to dig in themselves and set up their own stronger defensive positions. For example, one attack that took place on May 19th, 42,000 Ottoman troops attacked Anzac lines, and the Ottomans suffered 3,000 dead and 10,000 wounded. The Anzacs, however, suffered 160 killed and 468 wounded. So that huge discrepancy really shows how much of a difference these defensive positions really played on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Effectively, this had become all about attrition, just as it had on the Western Front. Gallipoli 2 was all about trench warfare, with some of these trenches being as close as 10 yards from each other. Disease, of course, was still common. Looking at the casualty numbers, it's just what you would expect in this type of situation when you see the amount of people that have been killed due to disease and others that have been due to battle. In August, there was a massive offensive that was set up by the Allies, and on August 6th, it brought about a new landing on the peninsula, which took place at Suvla Bay. There was initial successes, just like we had seen at the very beginning of the campaign, but it too ended up gaining very little ground. While part of a larger offensive, other objectives really failed to be completed, and now the Allies were beginning to think about what they would be doing on the peninsula next. Public opinion, especially in the UK, was being heavily impacted, and there appeared to be no real way to achieve victory. So the decision was made to evacuate. Another thing I guess I should kind of point out too that also impacted that decision was that Bulgaria had ended up joining the Central Powers. And while not necessarily a large nation as far as power goes, one thing that was very advantageous to the Turks was that it created a land route between Germany and the Ottoman Empire. So they were able to get more reinforcements and more supplies from Germany, with Bulgaria now on their side. So this evacuation was going to take place starting in December, and the casualties were expected to be very high as they would be, moving basically back to shore. There was a lot of things that were done to deceive the Ottomans as they were to try to retreat. A number of ruses that were set up. For example, one person had kind of put together a rifle that would fire on its own. It would drip water into, I think it was a pan or something like that would cause a weapon of fire, which would make the Ottomans think that there were more people in a trench than there actually were. And there was also a few instances too where the entire Allied line would just be quiet. No sounds were made, nobody would fire their weapons. Of course, the Ottomans would kind of wonder what was going on, and they'd come by or try to get up to try and investigate, and the Allies would just open fire on them and decimate them. The idea with that, though, was they really wanted the Ottomans to have the idea that silence was going to be the new normal on their lines, so that way once the lines had been abandoned, the Turkish wouldn't think that really anything had changed at that point, and would give them more time to fall back. So the final evacuation took place on January 9th, and when I was watching a documentary about the Gallipoli campaign, one thing that I found very interesting was that it said that of all the things that took place on during the Gallipoli campaign, it is ironic that the evacuation was the most successful part. And it's true, it definitely was. So with the forces, or Allied forces out of Gallipoli, there was a lot of time to be able to discuss what had taken place. This had basically destroyed Winston Churchill's career up to that point. Remember, this was kind of his idea for it, and since it was, in the minds of a lot of people, a defeat, he was really embarrassed by it and had to work his way back to the standing that he had. Obviously, he was able to do it since, he was prime minister during World War II and everything, which is a very interesting story. There's a documentary that I actually watched about it. But the success of Gallipoli is actually heavily debated because, yes, the Allies weren't able to complete the objective that they wanted of knocking the Ottoman Empire out of the war and things like that. They did do a lot to really destroy the Ottoman Empire's ability to supply their forces. They occupied a number of troops at Gallipoli as opposed to having them being spread out through the rest of the Middle East. But there's obviously a lot of negative things about it as well. So that's going to be it here for this episode. We're going to have a lot more coming up here. I've got the 3 episodes that actually take place with Lawrence of Arabia, and also Battlefield 5 is coming out. So subscribe if you haven't already for more information like this, where we're talking about the history of what's actually going on. Like the video. Make sure you join our Discord if you want to be in the know on what's going on. And of course, if you can, donate to Patreon to help support this work. I definitely appreciate it. But that's going to be it. War is hell. You don't have to worry because warfighters, I've got your 6.